Hey yo, what up? It's your boy. Halloween has just passed by us, and for a lot of people, especially those that celebrate Halloween every single month, then it's really a massive celebration of the spooky, scary season. As someone who was born and raised in Australia and having Japanese traditions and customs to follow, I wasn't exactly the biggest, I guess, Halloween enthusiast in saying that I don't think I've ever properly celebrated Halloween, just because this idea of Halloween and trick-or-treating wasn't really a thing in both Australia and Japan. Because admittedly, especially over here in Japan, Halloween is definitely a brand new endeavor for a lot of young people who have clearly been influenced by a lot of American media. And the same thing can be said for people outside of Japan as well, in other Asian countries such as in Korea, for example. But when people mention Halloween being a night of horror, I don't think they were expecting something like this. This is probably old news by now if you're watching this video as it comes out, but there has been some real tragedies that have happened this Halloween in 2022, especially over in South Korea, where the Halloween celebrations out on the streets turned into a really horrible incident that left 151 people dead. So according to this Japan Times article, it says here, young people flocking to Seoul's popular Itaewon district, I probably butchered that name, I apologize, on Saturday for the first virtually unrestricted Halloween festivities in 3 years, instead found themselves caught up in a deadly crush that killed at least 151 people. And mind you, this story is also continuing. They're also still trying to uncover a bunch of people who have been killed and injured. The crowd of partygoers, some still in their teens and many clad in Halloween costumes, was ready to enjoy the bars, nightclubs, and restaurants where the revelry routinely spins over into narrow and often steep side streets. But the intimacy of Itaewon's backstreets turned sinister this Halloween weekend. 24 hours before, there were already warning signs that the festivities were attracting dangerous numbers of people. On Friday night, a witness saw crowds in the area packed toe-to-toe at a Halloween street fair with booths offering face painting and selling candy and costumes. A day later, those crowds returned. Just before 10:20 p.m, chaos erupted, with police at times struggling to control the crowds. People poured into one particularly narrow and sloping alley even after it was already packed wall to wall. Social media footage showed some people trying to scale the sides of the buildings to escape the increasing pressure as others shouted, cried, or cursed, which is absolutely horrifying to think about. And look, I personally haven't seen any of the footage because, truth be told, I don't really want to see any of this footage. Absolutely horrifying footage that would just be completely and utterly devastating to watch, let alone be in. But then with the increasing pressure and the amount of people on the streets, it finally snapped. When those at the top of the slope fell, it sent people below them toppling over others. And yeah, a lot of people were just crushed in this sea of people falling down a narrow slope. Videos shared on social media showed a pile of bodies wedged between buildings, some at the bottom appearing unconscious, while others reached out to emergency workers who struggled to free them from the crush. And look, I'm sure it goes without saying that this is an absolutely horrible incident, and I give my full condolences to all of those who were affected. And I've been seeing a lot of murmurs on social media of people saying, well, you know, that they should have been prepared for this. It's the first Halloween. It's the first proper Halloween since the pandemic started 3 years ago. So of course, young people were going to be eager to get out of there. There should have been some measures that were put in place. It is really unfortunate. And the suckiest thing about all of this is that I think there is really no one to blame. At the end of the day, this is, I think, an incident that was just really unfortunate and definitely could have been stopped, but just everything just went wrong. And again, I don't think any single party is to blame for any of this. So I'm sure you heard again about this horrible incident in South Korea, and lo and behold, Japan definitely heard of it as well, with the Prime Minister even giving his condolences to those affected, especially considering that there were a couple of Japanese people who were killed in the incident as well. And it really shined a light on how Japan was going to handle the Halloween festivities, because let's just say Japan doesn't exactly have the cleanest record when it comes to some young people getting wild during Halloween. A really famous example of this actually happened back in 2018 before the pandemic, where, as it says here, a bunch of people over in Shibuya Scramble Crossing, which is where the Halloween festivities happen every single year, turned really, really ugly, with some young people getting a little bit too excited and a little bit too off the grid. As this Japan Times article says, a small truck was overturned and 5 people were arrested for alleged groping or similar offenses over the weekend, police said, as scores of people clad in Halloween costumes gathered in Shibuya Ward, Tokyo, a hub for the celebrations. But thankfully, as it says here, no one was injured in the incident, but the truck's left door was damaged and the police were investigating the case on suspicion of property destruction. And later on, a couple of people were actually arrested for the incident. Now, look, it definitely doesn't seem as bad as what happened in South Korea. Absolutely not. At least, you know, in Japan, when this whole thing happened, it was definitely big news when it happened because it was kind of unprecedented in Japan. You would expect these kinds of rioting to happen everywhere else except in Japan. Even during celebration times, you would think that, you know, Japan would be kind of chill about it and, you know, respectful about it and, you know, maybe not get too crazy. But it turns out that I guess Japan has taken a lot of hints from other countries in terms of how to celebrate Halloween. For a lot of these young people, it is the one night of the year where they can really, truly let go and just go wild and crazy out in the streets with everybody else. Again, Japan, for better or worse, is a collectivist society where if they see people around you having fun and getting rowdy and, hey, even toppling over cars and causing property damage, people are going to be sucked into that kind of energy and do things that they would probably otherwise very heavily regret. So with Japan having not that great of a track record when it comes to Halloween celebrations, and with what happened in South Korea a couple of days ago, Japan this year, when doing the Shibuya Halloween festivals, really put the foot on the brakes. Because again, much like in South Korea, this year was the first year where Japan decided to do the Halloween celebrations again. During the pandemic, yes, there were smaller, I guess, Halloween celebrations that were happening, but nothing to the scale of what it was like before the pandemic. But with Japan finally opening up their borders, and for the most part, the world pretty much coming to some kind of an understanding that, yeah, the pandemic is kind of over, or at least we'd like it to be over. So let's just like pretend that it's over and just like kind of, you know, get back into the swing of things, get back into how it was before the pandemic. This year, a couple of days ago, Japan decided to start up Halloween in Shibuya again, but with some really, really strong restraints. The streets were full and the pubs and clubs packed Saturday night as central Tokyo welcomed Halloween revelers back in large numbers, but the celebrations remain muted in comparison to the pre-pandemic years, with memories of a costumed assailant's 2021 stabbing spree still fresh. Yes, that was something that actually happened. Not to mention, on top of that, the stuff that happened in Seoul just the day before. Japan was definitely keeping on their toes. One reason for a comparative lack of typical Halloween hedonism was a ban on drinking alcohol on the street in the area, including a request from Shibuya Ward authorities that convenience stores refrain from selling alcoholic beverages at certain peak times throughout the weekend, which is a ballsy move, if you were to ask me. I mean, again, this is Japan that we are talking about, and there are not that many substances, quote unquote, that young people can ingest and consume for celebratory reasons. You know, it's not like in America where things like marijuana is legal. In fact, in Japan, it is extremely illegal. So alcohol and, I guess, smoking are really the two fun things, quote unquote, that young people can do to really let go, especially out in a public setting. So the fact that they went ahead and just completely banned the selling and consumption of alcohol during peak times of the Halloween celebrations is quite a ballsy move. And, you know, knowing Japan, I don't think a riot actually started from all of this stuff. I think Japanese people are very used to following the rules, especially those that have been implemented by governmental authorities like a ward office, for example. So, you know, I'm sure even though there are a lot of people who kind of were standing around being like, wow, really? I can't fucking drink alcohol on a celebration night like this while everyone's out and about? Fuck it, let's start a riot. I don't think anyone was like that. I think, you know, even though they had some grievances, they probably thought to themselves, well, nothing can be done, I guess. You know what? Let's just try and enjoy it as much as we can anyway. Which I'd say is probably the best thing about a lot of Japanese people and about the collectivist element of Japanese society, is that we are pretty goddamn good at following the rules. Local authorities had called for vigilance in the build-up to Halloween after last year's celebrations were marred by a knife and arson attack on a Tokyo train by a man dressed as the Joker that left 17 people injured, which again is an incident that unfortunately happened. I didn't actually cover it on this channel, but yeah, it was all over the Japanese news and it was absolutely horrifying and terrifying. Officials running the KO line where the attack occurred asked revelers to refrain from wearing costumes on the train on their way to Shibuya for Halloween, while a senior police official said before the event that security personnel would question anyone they felt was dressed suspiciously, which, you know, you would think on principle would be kind of an impossible thing to try and control, but again, Japan is very good, again, at following the rules, and I'm sure there were a lot of young people who, regardless of how much they wanted to get out there and celebrate and let loose on the one day of the year that they can let loose, I'm sure also don't want the same incident that happened last year to occur again. So I'm sure a lot of people were very cooperative in that element. While no specific entry restrictions were in place to limit the number of people gathering around Shibuya Station, security guards asked partygoers to put away any drinks they were carrying and to refrain from smoking in the street as a way to mitigate the risks of coronavirus infections following the recent relaxation of health protocols, including the opening of the country's borders to international tourism on October the 11th. Now, see, I feel kind of weird about this sentiment because, look, I get it. COVID is definitely still a thing. You know, the pandemic, as much as we'd like to pretend that it is all over, is definitely still around and will probably be around for most likely the rest of a lot of our lives. But at the same time, kind of using this like coronavirus infection spreading as somewhat of an excuse to stop people from like drinking and smoking on the streets, I don't know, man. I think it's kind of beating a dead horse at this point. Like, let's be real, drinking out in public is still not going to stop people from getting COVID. I mean, I'm sure during the midst of the pandemic, where the Japanese government tried to stop people from going to izakayas after like 7 or 8 p.m. because apparently that was the place where most of the virus was getting spread around. I feel it's kind of hard to pretend that drinking and smoking out on the streets is going to be the one thing that's going to spread the coronavirus, and not, you know, the fact that there are hundreds and thousands of people shoulder to shoulder on the streets of Shibuya. Like, if you really wanted to be careful about the coronavirus infection spreading, then they probably should have put in some kind of an entry restriction. But as it says here, no specific entry restrictions were in place to limit the number of people gathering around Shibuya Station. Because let's be real, that's the one thing that's going to stop the spread of the coronavirus infection. I don't know why they use the coronavirus infection to make it as an excuse to stop drinking and smoking. Like, just tell people the truth. You know, we just don't want people to get too rowdy. Japanese people will fully understand that. They're not stupid. They know why they want people to not be as drunk and as rowdy on the streets, because of the shit that happened in South Korea, of the shit that happened 3 years ago, of the incident that happened last year. Again, Halloween in Asian countries does not have a fantastic track record, and I think the majority of people who are going to these Halloween celebrations, especially in Shibuya, they probably know what the fuck is going on. It was only in the early 2000s that Shibuya Scramble Crossing became the center for Halloween festivities, with the celebration scene today evolving out of Halloween meets by cosplayers living in the area. And yes, even though it was the early 2000s that I guess was the start of these Halloween celebrations in Japan, I'd say it's not until maybe around like 2015, 2016 where Halloween in Shibuya became a really massive thing. So much so to the point where, again, restrictions had to be made. The Shibuya Ward office put their foot on the brakes and went, yo, you guys can celebrate all you want. That's totally cool, dog, but just don't get ahead of yourselves because shit might go down. And look, I think one of the most interesting things that I have seen concerning this massive gathering and unhinged behavior from young people on Halloween nights in Shibuya is a lot of, especially older people, just saying, yo, why don't you just like not make this happen? I'm not saying ban Halloween in Japan, but you know, maybe stop people from gathering in a place like Shibuya to do this kind of shit. You know, maybe just tell people to go home. And look, I totally get where they're coming from in that sense, but at the same time, I fully disagree with that idea, and I don't really think it is a solution to the core of the problem. Because yes, Halloween is definitely celebrated much differently in Asian countries than it is in, say, America or any other Western country. In Japan, for example, it's not so much this idea of going around the neighborhood, going trick-or-treating, you know, going to your neighbor's house and grabbing some candy and shit like that, although I'm sure there are a lot of Japanese people who are partaking in Halloween festivities like that. When Japanese people think of Halloween, they think of cosplay, and they think of going to Shibuya and getting piss shit drunk and talking up a bunch of girls and guys and getting laid, which, you know, is fucking awesome. I'm totally for that, especially in a country like Japan where, again, young people especially don't really have a lot of opportunities to just go balls to the walls and just go all out and celebrate and let loose and relieve a lot of stress, I'm sure, that has been built up through the insane work culture that Japan still has and that young people in Japan are still subject to this day. I just think what Japan needs to do is, again, learn how to celebrate in a more responsible manner. And I think, you know, for the first time ever, give a little bit of a golf clap to the Japanese government for actually doing exactly that. This sentiment of, hey, young people of Japan, you can go out and celebrate Halloween all you want. We see that you guys are having a fucking awesome time, but just do so responsibly. We don't want people getting hurt, we don't want property getting damaged, and we certainly don't want what happened in South Korea to happen in Japan. So yeah, this idea of should Japan ban Halloween? No, I don't think they should. I think Japan is doing Halloween pretty goddamn well, and again, especially with this timing as well of Japan opening up their borders a couple of weeks ago, I'm sure there were a shitload of foreigners that also went to Shibuya on Halloween night and got to experience a completely different side of Halloween and a completely different side of Japan and Japanese culture. Let's just say that is a fantastic thing for Japan in terms of tourism. That's like another thing that Japan can tick off the list of the number of things that tourists in Japan can look forward to throughout the year, and I feel it's a fantastic way to really show, I guess, the uniqueness of Japanese culture and how they can put a little bit of a spin on something that is very non-Japanese. But yes, either way, my condolences go out to all of those who were affected in the South Korea incident, and you know, shout out to the Japanese people who went to Halloween and did it responsibly. And you know, luckily this year, as of right now, there have been no incidents and no news of people getting hurt, of property getting damaged. In fact, my girlfriend actually went to Halloween in Shibuya this year, and she actually said it was fucking awesome. She went a couple of years ago, you know, before the pandemic, and she said, yeah, it wasn't that great of an experience, but this year it seemed like it was a great experience. I think Japanese people have finally started to realize there is a way to celebrate something like this in a fun and safe way for everyone. But yeah, those are my 2 cents on that. I'm personally not really someone who celebrates Halloween, but hey, if you do, good on you, and I hope you had a fantastic Halloween this year. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and hey, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to smack my face right there to subscribe to the channel. Let's keep making big channel number go bigger, and over here next to my head is a couple more videos you can check out if you enjoyed this one. Also, all of my social media, Patreon, Twitter, Instagram, and my brand new shorts channel and TikTok is all down in the description below, so make sure to check those out as well. But thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace!